Rachel Monroe was folding patient charts at the senior care center when the envelope arrived. Cream paper, gold trim, her full name printed like a verdict. She knew the handwriting before she opened it. Ethan, her ex-husband, the man who left her with silence and bills. Inside was an invitation to his engagement party, private country club, Saturday night, formal attire. At the bottom, a neat line read, "Hope you can come. It would mean a lot." Rachel laughed once, sharp and ugly, drawing stares from residents down the hall. Ethan never meant things to mean a lot. He meant reminders. Reminders of the life he rebuilt without her. Reminders of what he told her the last night in their house, that she was a weight, not a wife. She slid the invitation into her pocket and finished her shift with shaking hands. Her phone buzzed. Another missed call from the pharmacy. Her father's medication was overdue again. Everything was overdue lately. At home, Rachel sat on the edge of her bed and read the invitation again. She imagined the room full of polished smiles, Ethan's arm around a younger woman, his eyes searching for her reaction. He wanted her there, not because he cared, but because he wanted witnesses. Rachel told herself she wouldn't go. She had survived worse than his cruelty. She had survived being erased. But as she stared at the date, her chest tightened. If she didn't show up, he would control the story. If she did, he could break her in public. Rachel picked up the invitation again, her fingers numb, and whispered to the empty room, "Not this time." Outside, rain tapped the window, as if the night itself was holding its breath there. She had no idea that walking into Ethan's party would cost him everything, and nearly cost her life. Before the invitation, Rachel Monroe had already lost her marriage long before the divorce papers arrived. When she met Ethan Monroe in her late 20s, he was ambitious, insecure, and constantly afraid of being ordinary. She loved him anyway. Rachel worked days at a clinic and nights at a grocery store, paying rent while Ethan chased business ideas that failed one by one. She told herself marriage meant patience. When Ethan finally succeeded, everything changed. Promotions came, money followed, and gratitude disappeared. He stopped asking how her shifts went. He stopped coming home early. When Rachel talked about returning to nursing school, Ethan laughed and said they needed stability, not dreams. Slowly, her world became smaller, shaped around his needs and his temper. The deepest wound came quietly. After years of trying for a child, doctors told Rachel she would need medical intervention. Ethan pretended to support her, but his disappointment seeped into every conversation. He avoided eye contact. He stayed out late. When complications ended her chance of conceiving, Ethan said nothing for days. Then one night he told her she had failed at the one thing a wife should do. The divorce followed soon after. Ethan hired a sharp lawyer and moved fast. Rachel signed papers she barely understood, too tired to fight. She walked away with her clothes, her old car, and a silence so heavy it felt physical. Friends drifted away. Ethan controlled the narrative. To the world, he was the driven man who outgrew a fragile marriage. Rachel never defended herself. She buried the truth and focused on survival. She took the night job at the senior care center, caring for strangers while ignoring her own grief. Every paycheck went to bills, her father's treatments, and keeping the lights on. There was no time to heal. No one ever asked what she lost. By the time Ethan's invitation arrived, Rachel wasn't broken. She was exhausted, invisible, and underestimated. And that was exactly why no one saw what was coming next. Because the woman they dismissed had already learned how to endure far worse than humiliation. Rachel Monroe's life after divorce did not collapse in one dramatic moment. It narrowed. Every day became smaller, tighter, shaped by responsibility and quiet fear. She rented a one-bedroom apartment above a closed laundromat, where the heat failed in winter and the ceiling leaked when it rained. She learned which footsteps on the stairs belonged to neighbors and which meant the landlord wanted money. She worked nights at the senior care center, sleeping in fragments during the day. Her body was always tired, but her mind never rested. Bills lined the kitchen table like accusations. Medical statements for her father sat unopened for days because she already knew the numbers would not make sense. Some months, She chose groceries over medication and prayed nothing bad would happen. Rachel's father had once been strong and proud. Now he needed help standing, bathing, remembering. She drove him to appointments in her aging car, smiling while calculating gas money in her head. She never complained. Complaining felt like a luxury she could not afford. Loneliness settled in quietly. Friends from her old life stopped calling. Invitations faded. People did not know where to place a divorced woman with no children and no success story. Rachel stopped trying to explain herself. It was easier to disappear. At night, she sometimes replayed Ethan's voice in her head, telling her she was holding him back. On her worst days, she almost believed it. On her better days, she reminded herself that survival was not failure. Still, doubt lingered like a bruise that never fully healed. When the engagement invitation arrived, it landed in a life already stretched to its limits. Rachel knew attending meant emotional risk she could not afford, but not attending meant surrendering her name to Ethan's version of the past. She stood in her kitchen holding the envelope, realizing this was no longer about him. It was about whether she would keep shrinking or finally take up space again. And that choice would push her into a night where everything she had endured would be tested. Rachel Monroe told herself she would throw the invitation away, but the truth followed her everywhere. The senior care center announced reduced hours that same week. Her paycheck shrank overnight. The landlord left another notice taped crookedly to her door. Rent was due, patience was gone. Then her father's doctor called. Insurance would no longer cover one of his medications. The monthly cost was more than Rachel spent on food. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at numbers that refused to cooperate. Something had to give. That night, Rachel searched Ethan's name online. Articles praised his business success. Photos showed him smiling, confident, surrounded by people who believed his version of everything. In comment sections, strangers congratulated him for starting over. Her chest tightened. Silence would let his story become permanent. What hurt most was realizing how easily she had been erased. Years of sacrifice reduced to a footnote, a failed chapter he had already closed. Rachel imagined him raising a glass, speaking kindly about her in a way that sounded generous but final. If she stayed invisible, no one would ever question it. Rachel realized refusing the invitation meant letting Ethan write her ending. Attending meant walking into a room designed to shrink her. Neither option was safe, but one allowed her to be seen. She didn't own an evening dress. She didn't have money for a salon. She stood in front of the mirror, studying the lines exhaustion had carved into her face. Then she straightened. Survival had already taught her endurance. Rachel pressed her only black dress, simple and outdated. She reminded herself she was not attending to compete, beg, or impress. She was attending to exist. Outside, rain tapped against the window. Her phone buzzed again, the pharmacy reminder flashing like a warning. Time was running out. Rachel picked up the invitation one last time and exhaled. She was done hiding. Because this night was no longer about Ethan's triumph, but about reclaiming her name, her voice, and whatever dignity remained before it was erased forever. The country club rose behind iron gates, glowing against the dark sky like a promise Rachel Monroe had never been invited into. Valet lights flashed. Laughter spilled from the entrance. She stepped out of her car slowly, smoothing her dress, already aware she did not belong to the world unfolding before her. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, linen tablecloths, servers carrying champagne as if gravity did not apply to them. Rachel felt every year of her life as she crossed the room. Conversations paused. Eyes flicked toward her, curious, measuring. Then she saw Ethan. He looked unchanged, polished by success. His suit fit perfectly. His smile was confident, practiced. At his side stood Lily Harrington, younger, elegant, radiant in a way Rachel once believed she could be. Lily's hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm, as if she belonged there by natural law. Rachel felt the old reflex to shrink, but she forced herself to stand tall. She reminded herself she had survived nights far darker than this room. Ethan noticed her and smiled wider. He kissed Lily's cheek, then turned, guiding her toward Rachel with deliberate ease. The moment stretched. Guests leaned in, sensing something unscripted. "Rachel!" Ethan said warmly, loud enough for others to hear. "You made it." Lily's eyes met Rachel's, kind but curious. "It's nice to finally meet you," she said. Rachel nodded, choosing her words carefully. "Congratulations." Ethan laughed, pleased. "We wanted you here. You were such an important part of my past." The phrase landed exactly as intended. Past finished, over. Around them, polite smiles froze. Someone sipped too loudly. Rachel felt heat rise to her face but kept her expression calm. She would not give him the satisfaction. As music swelled and glasses clinked, Rachel understood something clearly. This party was not a celebration. It was a display of power. Every decoration, every smile, every whisper existed to crown Ethan and quietly remind Rachel of her supposed failure tonight alone. And she had walked straight into it. What Ethan didn't realize was that power shifts fastest when everyone believes the story is already decided. Ethan didn't let the moment rest. He guided Rachel deeper into the room, one hand firm on her back, steering her toward a cluster of guests she didn't recognize. His voice carried easily, trained by years of meetings and applause. "Everyone," he said, lifting his glass. "This is Rachel, my first wife." The words landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. A few people laughed politely. Others nodded with practiced sympathy. Someone murmured, "How nice of you to come." Rachel felt dozens of eyes settle on her, weighing her worth in seconds. Ethan smiled, enjoying the silence. "Rachel and I wanted very different things," he continued. "I needed growth, direction. She preferred a simpler life." It wasn't a lie, it was worse. It was a distortion sharpened just enough to wound. Rachel's mouth went dry. She realized this was the story Ethan had been telling for years, now performed live: the failed wife, the man who moved on, the woman who couldn't keep up. Lily stood beside him, her smile fixed, her fingers tightening around her glass. She watched Rachel closely, as if something didn't quite align. Rachel forced herself to speak. "I'm happy you found what you were looking for," she said evenly. Ethan tilted his head, amused. "See, always gracious." A server passed with champagne. Rachel declined. Her hands were shaking now, though she kept them folded. She could feel the room shifting, people deciding who deserved their respect. A woman leaned toward Rachel and whispered, "It must be hard seeing him so successful." Rachel met her eyes and nodded once. Hard was surviving quietly. Hard was being reduced to a footnote. Ethan raised his glass again, ready to move on, satisfied with the damage. But as applause began, Rachel noticed something change. The air felt heavier, charged with questions no one dared to ask yet that night. Across the room, Lily's smile faded. She was no longer looking at Rachel. She was watching Ethan. And for the first time that night, someone else saw the cruelty he thought was invisible. Rachel slipped away from the crowd as applause faded, moving toward the balcony doors as if pulled by instinct. The air inside felt thin. Outside, night wrapped the club in cool darkness. She gripped the railing and breathed, counting slowly, refusing to cry where anyone could see. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from the hospital. Her father had fallen again. They were running tests. The nurse's voice was careful, professional, never comforting. Rachel closed her eyes. Even here, even now, responsibility chased her. Inside, laughter swelled again. Music resumed. Life went on without pause. Rachel wondered how many times she had told herself to endure just a little longer. How many times she had swallowed words to keep peace. She felt something crack, quiet but deep. She thought of the woman she used to be, the one who believed love was enough, that loyalty would be returned. That woman felt distant, almost fictional. What remained was someone tired of being small. The balcony door opened. Rachel stiffened, expecting Ethan. Instead, a man stepped out hesitantly, gray-haired, poorly dressed for the occasion. He looked surprised to see her, then relieved. "Sorry," he said softly. "I just needed air." Rachel nodded, stepping aside. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. She noticed his hands shaking as he leaned against the wall. "Big celebration," he added without humor. Rachel almost laughed. Instead, she said, "Some nights feel louder than others." He studied her for a moment as if weighing something. "I don't belong here," he said. "I don't belong anywhere anymore." The words hit her harder than Ethan's insults. Rachel recognized that tone. It was the sound of someone standing at an edge no one else could see. Before she could respond, her phone rang again. Unknown number. Hospital. Rachel answered, her voice steady while her world tilted. "Yes," she said quietly. "I understand." She hung up, staring at the city lights, knowing the night had just crossed a line she could not step back from, because the stranger beside her was about to change everything she thought she was losing tonight. The man introduced himself as Caleb Brooks, his voice low, careful, as if every word cost him something. He apologized for intruding, then surprised Rachel by asking if she was okay. No one had asked her that all night. She nodded out of habit, then stopped. "Not really," she said. Caleb exhaled, a sound between relief and surrender. He told her he had been invited by Ethan for appearances, not friendship. Years ago, Caleb owned a manufacturing firm. A regulatory scandal, mostly lies, destroyed it within months. His wife left, his daughter spiraled. Last winter, she didn't survive. He said the words plainly, as if emotion would shatter him if he let it breathe. Rachel listened, forgetting the party behind the glass doors. She didn't interrupt. She knew how fragile confessions could be when finally spoken aloud. Caleb admitted he came tonight because it felt like the last obligation on a list he no longer wanted to finish. He stared at the railing, hands clenched, and said he was tired of waking up alone. Rachel told him about caring for her father, about nights spent counting pills and dollars, about being erased from a marriage she built. She didn't soften it. She spoke because silence had already taken enough. Caleb looked at her then, really looked, as if realizing he wasn't alone on the edge. He asked how she kept going. Rachel answered honestly. "I don't know," she said. "I just don't quit on people who need me." The music inside swelled. Laughter burst out. Caleb nodded slowly. He said he had planned to leave after stepping onto the balcony, to disappear somewhere no one would look. Hearing her voice had delayed that plan. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text confirmed her father was stable. She showed Caleb the screen, offering fragile hope. He swallowed hard. "Maybe," he said, "tonight isn't finished with us yet." Rachel felt the night shift inside her, subtle but real, because the stranger's pain had just crossed into her life, and nothing would remain untouched after this moment. Forever changed. Rachel leaned against the cold railing, letting the night steady her breathing. Caleb's shoulders sagged as if speaking had loosened something painful inside him. She recognized that look. It was the moment after honesty, when fear rushes in and asks if you said too much. She told him he wasn't weak for feeling done. She said grief doesn't follow rules, and shame lies about being alone. Her voice stayed calm, even as her chest ached. She didn't offer solutions. She offered presence. Sometimes that was the only thing that kept people standing. Caleb admitted he hadn't told anyone about his daughter, not friends, not colleagues. Saying it aloud felt like betrayal and relief at once. Rachel listened, nodding, grounding him with small responses. She spoke about nights sitting in hospital parking lots, praying for strength she didn't believe she had. She told him survival could look ordinary and still be heroic. Inside, applause erupted again. Someone clinked a glass. Rachel flinched. The contrast felt cruel. She wondered how many people in that room were quietly breaking while pretending to celebrate. Caleb asked her why she came tonight. Rachel answered without hesitation. "Because I was tired of disappearing," she said. The words surprised her with their certainty. She realized she meant them. He studied her, eyes wet but focused now. He said he had planned to end everything after the party, somewhere quiet, somewhere final. Saying it out loud stripped the plan of its power. Rachel felt fear surge, then steadied herself. She asked him to stay. Not forever, just through the night. She told him tomorrow could be decided tomorrow. For now, he mattered. Caleb nodded slowly. He straightened, breathing deeper. The edge softened. He realized for the first time that staying alive tonight was not surrender, but a choice, and that someone witnessing his pain made the darkness retreat slightly inside his chest and trembling hands. Behind them, the balcony door creaked open, and the moment of fragile connection was about to be interrupted by the last person Rachel wanted to see. The balcony door opened wider, and Ethan stepped out, irritation already carved into his face. He glanced at Caleb, then at Rachel, his mouth tightening as if he had caught her doing something improper. The music behind him pulsed, oblivious. "There you are," Ethan said lightly, though his eyes were sharp. "I was wondering where you disappeared to." Rachel straightened. "I needed air." Ethan laughed and looked at Caleb. "Networking already?" he asked. "Impressive." Caleb said nothing. He didn't look away. Ethan turned back to Rachel, lowering his voice just enough to sound concerned. "People are starting to ask questions," he said. "This is my engagement party. I'd appreciate it if you didn't make things uncomfortable." Rachel felt heat rush to her face. "I'm not doing anything." Ethan leaned closer. "You always do," he said quietly. "You don't even realize it." Before Rachel could respond, her phone rang again. The hospital. She answered, heart pounding, turning slightly away. The doctor explained her father needed observation overnight. Insurance approval was uncertain. Rachel thanked him and ended the call, her hand shaking. Ethan noticed. "More drama?" he asked. "You really know how to time it." Something inside Rachel snapped, but she swallowed it down. Caleb stepped forward instead. "Enough," Caleb said, calm but firm. Ethan blinked, surprised. "Excuse me?" "You don't speak to people like that," Caleb continued. "Especially not someone who's clearly carrying more than you ever bothered to notice." Ethan scoffed. "This doesn't concern you." Caleb met his gaze without flinching. "It does tonight." Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had come expecting humiliation, not defense. Her phone buzzed again with a pharmacy notice. She was trapped between responsibility, exhaustion, and a confrontation she never planned. Inside, someone called Ethan's name, asking for a toast. The party demanded his return. Ethan smiled tightly at Rachel. "We'll talk later," he said. As he turned away, Rachel realized this night was no longer under his control, and the cost of it was rising fast. For her, escape was no longer. Ethan returned to the center of the room, lifting his glass, ready to reclaim attention. Rachel stayed on the balcony, heart racing, certain the damage was already done. Then Caleb followed, stepping inside with quiet resolve that didn't match his worn suit. Ethan began his toast, joking about second chances and finding the right partner at the right time. Laughter followed on cue. Rachel felt her stomach twist. She turned away, but Caleb didn't. "Before you continue," Caleb said, his voice steady but clear. The room stilled. Ethan froze, glass midair. "I'm sorry," he said, forcing a smile. Caleb looked around, meeting unfamiliar faces. "I was invited here as a business acquaintance," he said, "but I can't stand by while someone uses a celebration to publicly humiliate another person." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lily stiffened. Ethan laughed sharply. "This is inappropriate." "What's inappropriate," Caleb replied, "is rewriting history to make cruelty look like success." Rachel's breath caught. She felt dozens of eyes shift toward her. Caleb continued. "Rachel supported this man when no one else did. She worked, sacrificed, and stayed loyal while he chased ambitions that failed repeatedly. That's not weakness. That's character." Ethan's smile cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about." Caleb finally turned to him. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," he said quietly, "because I was there when you needed money, guidance, a way out." The room went silent. Lily's grip on her glass tightened. Rachel's knees trembled. She hadn't known Caleb's connection ran this deep. Ethan set his glass down too hard. "This isn't the place." Caleb nodded. "You're right," he said. "The truth rarely arrives where it's welcome." Guests shifted uncomfortably. Phones appeared. Whispers spread like sparks. Rachel realized something profound in that moment. She had come alone, expecting to be broken again. Instead, someone she barely knew had chosen to stand beside her, and Ethan could feel it. Control was slipping through his fingers, and there was no way to gather it back. For the first time since the divorce, Rachel sensed justice moving slowly, deliberately, and once it started, nothing Ethan said could ever stop it from unfolding tonight completely. The silence stretched, brittle as glass. Ethan searched faces for support and found none he could command. Lily stepped closer, her voice measured. "What does he mean?" she asked. "About rewriting history?" The question wasn't loud, but it carried. Ethan smiled thinly. "This isn't the time." Caleb shook his head. "It's the only time," he said, "because lies survive on comfort." He turned to Lily. "Rachel paid the bills when Ethan couldn't. She delayed her schooling so he could keep chasing deals. When doctors warned of risks, Ethan pressured her anyway, then blamed her when consequences arrived." A ripple of shock moved the room. Rachel felt exposed, yet oddly steady. She hadn't planned to speak, but the truth was already breathing. "I signed forms I didn't understand," she said. "I trusted him." Her voice didn't break. "After the complications, he stopped coming home." Ethan cut in fast. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Lily repeated. Her eyes flicked between them, searching for a crack. "You told me your marriage ended because you grew apart." Caleb replied softly. "They grew unequal." Phones lifted, whispers sharpened. Ethan's jaw tightened as he tried to regain control. "You're twisting things," he said to Rachel. "You always did." Rachel met his gaze. "I kept quiet because I was ashamed," she said. "Not because it wasn't true." Lily inhaled slowly. She asked Ethan one last question. "Did you pressure her?" Ethan hesitated. Just a breath, it was enough. The room seemed to lean forward. Lily removed her hand from his arm. "I need honesty," she said, "not speeches." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. The damage settled, visible and irreversible. Rachel felt a strange calm. The truth had slipped free, and it wasn't hers to carry alone anymore. Some guests stepped back. Others leaned in, and the band faltered, uncertain, as if the room itself understood a reckoning had been summoned and would demand witnesses. Across the room, Lily set her glass down, and everyone sensed the engagement was about to fracture in public before anyone could stop it. Lily Harrington stepped away from Ethan, the space between them suddenly louder than the music. Her face remained composed, but her hands trembled as she set her glass down. She wasn't looking at Rachel anymore. She was replaying moments from her own relationship, now colored differently. She remembered Ethan questioning her ambitions, framing it as concern. She remembered how decisions always seemed to land his way. At the time, she called it maturity. Now it felt rehearsed. "Is this true?" Lily asked quietly. Ethan reached for her arm. "You're letting strangers confuse you." Lily pulled back. "You told me you valued honesty." Rachel watched, heart pounding, realizing this was no longer about her past. It was about Lily's future, and Lily could finally see it. Caleb spoke once more, not accusatory, just firm. "Patterns repeat when no one challenges them." Lily nodded slowly. She turned to Rachel. "I'm sorry," she said, "for believing a single story." The apology landed gently, unexpected and sincere. Rachel swallowed, managing a nod. Ethan's voice rose. "This is absurd. We're celebrating." Lily looked at him fully now. "You're performing," she said, "and I'm done applauding." A hush fell. Even the band stopped playing. Lily removed the engagement ring, staring at it as if it belonged to someone else. "I won't build a life on half-truths," she said. Gasps rippled. Phones lifted higher. Ethan laughed sharply, panicked. "You're embarrassing me." Lily placed the ring on the table between them. "No," she replied. "You did that yourself." Rachel felt something release inside her chest. Not triumph, relief. The cycle was breaking in front of her. As Lily walked away from Ethan, guests parted instinctively. The future he had planned dissolved in seconds. And Rachel understood this wasn't revenge. It was consequence arriving right on time. Across the room, whispers hardened into judgment, and Ethan felt it closing in. Rachel stood still, realizing this awakening was only the beginning. The night had turned irreversible, and what followed would destroy the man who believed control was permanent. Nothing prepared him for the consequences already moving toward him fast. The room buzzed with voices, but Rachel felt strangely calm. For years, she had protected a truth that burned inside her, believing silence was mercy. Watching Ethan unravel, she realized silence had only protected him. She stepped forward before fear could stop her. "There's something else," Rachel said. Conversations died instantly. She looked at Lily, then at the crowd. "Our marriage didn't end because we grew apart. It ended because Ethan made choices for my body without my consent." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Rachel continued, steady. "After years of trying to have a child, doctors warned me about risks. Ethan said I was overreacting. He said a wife supports her husband's legacy. He pushed, and I trusted him." Ethan shook his head violently. "That's not how it happened." Rachel didn't look at him. "The procedure left complications, permanent ones. When the doctors told me I couldn't carry a child, Ethan didn't hold my hand. He asked how soon we could finalize the divorce." Lily covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Rachel swallowed. I was ashamed. I thought my body failed him, so I left quietly and let him tell the story his way. Ethan's voice cracked. You're lying. Caleb stepped beside Rachel. Medical records don't lie. Phones rose higher. The air thickened. Rachel met Ethan's eyes at last. You didn't just leave me. You blamed me for damage you caused. The words landed like a verdict. Ethan's shoulders sagged as murmurs turned sharp. Business partners exchanged looks. Faces hardened. Rachel felt no triumph, only release. The truth was no longer hers to carry alone. She stepped back, heart pounding, knowing this revelation had changed everything forever. Some guests looked away in discomfort. Others leaned closer, sensing history being rewritten, realizing this party would be remembered not for love or champagne, but for the moment truth finally spoke. Because from this moment on, Ethan's success would be questioned, his reputation dismantled, and the consequences he escaped for years would finally come due at last tonight, right here. Lily stood very still, as if movement might shatter the fragile clarity forming inside her. Ethan kept talking, excuses spilling fast, but she no longer heard the words. She heard patterns, familiar ones. She remembered how he discouraged her from freezing her eggs, calling it unnecessary pressure. She remembered signing documents without fully reading them because he said he had already handled it. She remembered apologizing for things she couldn't explain. All of it aligned now. Did you ever consider what she wanted? Lily asked, her voice calm in a way that frightened Ethan. He scoffed. You're letting her poison you. Lily turned fully toward Rachel. Did you feel like you had a choice? Rachel hesitated, then answered honestly. I thought love meant obedience. The room felt heavier. Lily closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had hardened behind the sadness. She looked at Ethan the way one looks at a stranger. You did the same thing to me, Lily said quietly. Just earlier, more carefully. Ethan laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. No, Lily replied. It's familiar. She slid the ring off slowly, deliberately, letting it rest in her palm. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. Ethan's face drained of color. I won't marry someone who controls by pretending it's care, Lily said. I won't sacrifice my body or my future to protect your image. Ethan reached for her again. She stepped back. I believe her, Lily continued, nodding toward Rachel, and I believe you would have done the same to me. She placed the ring on the table beside them. The sound was soft, final. Rachel felt tears sting her eyes, not from victory, but from recognition. Someone had finally seen the truth and chosen differently. As Lily walked away, the room split around her. Ethan stood alone, exposed. And in that silence, everyone understood something irreversible had happened. Tonight, the engagement party transformed into a reckoning, and Rachel sensed that while her suffering had been long and quiet, its acknowledgement had finally begun, setting in motion consequences that would echo far beyond this room for every person watching closely. Ethan stood frozen as Lily disappeared into the crowd, her heels echoing louder than the whispers now filling the room. The confident man who had planned this night down to every detail suddenly looked unsure where to place his hands. His smile flickered, then vanished completely. This is getting out of control, he said, forcing a laugh that fooled no one. No one answered. Guests avoided his eyes. A few stepped back, creating space as if distance could protect them from association. Someone near the bar quietly put their phone away, already satisfied they had captured enough. Ethan cleared his throat and turned toward Rachel, anger breaking through the panic. You planned this, he snapped. You came here to ruin my life. Rachel didn't raise her voice. You invited me, she said. I told the truth. That was worse. Caleb stepped forward again, holding a folded document. Since we're being honest, he said, there's something else people here should know. He looked directly at Ethan. I was your silent investor during your early expansion. You violated our agreement. I chose not to pursue it then. I won't make that mistake again. A ripple of shock ran through the room. Business partners exchanged alarmed looks. Someone whispered, That's the Brooks case. Ethan lunged forward. You can't do this here. Caleb remained calm. I can, and I am. He addressed the room. Effective immediately, all remaining support is withdrawn. Audits will follow. The word audits landed hard. Ethan's face drained of color. Sweat beaded at his temples. The mask was gone now, replaced by something raw and frightened. He looked around, searching for allies, but found only judgment. Rachel watched quietly, her heart pounding. This was never what she wanted, but she didn't look away. For years, she had absorbed his power in silence. Now she witnessed its collapse. The band packed up their instruments. Servers stopped pouring drinks. The party dissolved into clusters of stunned conversations. Ethan sank into a chair, staring at nothing. The man who came to humiliate his ex-wife had lost everything he valued most, in front of everyone who mattered. And Rachel understood then that karma didn't arrive screaming. It arrived calmly, with witnesses, and left nothing to argue with afterward. The night unraveled quickly after that. Guests began leaving in quiet waves, heels clicking faster, voices lowered. No one wanted to be seen choosing a side, but the choice had already been made. Ethan sat alone, staring at his phone as messages arrived faster than he could read them. Rachel moved through the room slowly, gathering her coat, her bag, the fragments of herself she had brought inside. People avoided her eyes at first, then a few nodded. One woman whispered, "I'm sorry." Another said nothing but pressed her hand briefly against Rachel's arm, a small acknowledgement that mattered more than applause. Caleb stayed near the door, watching Ethan with an expression that held no pleasure. "This isn't revenge," he said quietly to Rachel. "It's correction." She understood. Some consequences were delayed, not denied. Ethan finally looked up, his voice cracking as he called her name. "Rachel, please." The word tasted unfamiliar coming from him. She stopped, but didn't turn back immediately. For the first time, she controlled the silence. "What do you want?" she asked. "I never meant for it to go this far," Ethan said. "You could help me explain." Rachel faced him then. She saw a stranger stripped of certainty. "I spent years explaining you," she replied. "Tonight, I'm done." She walked away before he could answer. The doors closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt clean, almost startling. Rachel inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Her father was resting, stable. Behind her, the lights of the country club dimmed. Inside, Ethan's future was being dismantled piece by piece through conversations, calls, and consequences he could no longer control. Rachel stepped into the night knowing something irreversible had shifted. Justice had arrived not through cruelty, but through truth, and it was already reshaping every life it touched, starting with his and finally freeing hers. At last, she walked forward without fear, carrying dignity, survival, and a future earned alone. The days after the engagement party passed quietly, almost strangely so. No calls from Ethan, no explanations demanded. The silence felt different this time, not heavy but open, like a window finally cracked. Rachel returned to her routine, but something inside her had shifted. At the senior care center, residents noticed it first. She smiled more easily. She stood straighter. When problems arose, she addressed them without apology. For years, she had learned to make herself smaller. Now she didn't. Caleb checked in with her once, then again. Not to relive the night, but to make sure she was holding steady. He helped arrange better care for her father, connecting her with resources she never knew existed. For the first time, Rachel slept through an entire night without waking in panic. The rumors about Ethan moved fast. Deals paused. Invitations stopped. His name, once praised, became cautious to mention. Rachel didn't follow the details closely. She didn't need to. She already knew how the story would end. One afternoon, Rachel opened an email that made her hands tremble. A nursing school she had once applied to years ago had reopened her file. A private education grant was attached. No spotlight, no announcement, just an opportunity. She sat at her kitchen table and cried, quietly, fully for the first time in years. Rachel didn't suddenly become rich. Her apartment was the same. Her car still rattled, but her life was no longer shrinking. It was expanding slowly, honestly. She understood then that reward doesn't always arrive as applause. Sometimes it arrives as peace, as choice, as the chance to begin again without fear. And as she prepared her textbooks that night, Rachel realized the party that was meant to destroy her had done the opposite. It had returned her future, one steady step at a time. She closed the book, breathed deeply, and knew tomorrow would still be hard, but it would finally be hers, shaped by truth, resilience, and a quiet hope no one could ever take away from her again forever inside. Rachel's life settled into a rhythm built on effort and intention. Nursing school was demanding, but it filled her with a sense of purpose she had forgotten. She studied between shifts, memorized procedures on the bus, and reminded herself daily that growth could be uncomfortable without being wrong. Caleb became a steady presence, never intrusive, never distant. They met for coffee after her classes, talking about ordinary things. Loss no longer dominated every conversation. Some days they laughed, surprised by it. Other days they sat quietly, sharing space without pressure. Rachel noticed how kindness worked differently than sacrifice. It didn't erase her needs. It didn't require silence. It met her where she stood and asked nothing in return. That realization softened parts of her she thought were permanently hardened. One evening, while reviewing notes, Rachel received a message from Ethan. A long apology, explanations, regret. She read it once, then closed her phone. She didn't feel anger. She felt finished. Instead of replying, she went for a walk with Caleb through a nearby park. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. The air smelled clean. For the first time, Rachel talked about the future without fear. She didn't outline a perfect life. She spoke about stability, dignity, and helping others who felt unseen. Caleb listened, smiling gently. He told her she had already changed more lives than she realized. Rachel thought of the residents she cared for, her father sleeping peacefully, and a stranger once standing on a balcony edge. Healing, she realized, was not loud. It didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly through choices made again and again. As the sun set, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Not for pain, but for survival. For the chance to choose kindness without losing herself. She walked home knowing her story was no longer defined by what was taken from her, but by what she continued to give freely, wisely, and with strength that came from finally being whole. At last she trusted herself, her future, and the quiet certainty that kindness and courage would guide every step forward ahead. Rachel Monroe stood in her graduation gown under bright auditorium lights, her name echoing once, then fading into applause. She didn't search the crowd for anyone. She didn't need witnesses anymore. The moment belonged to her alone. Her father sat in the front row, thinner but smiling, clapping with careful hands. Caleb stood a few rows back, respectful, proud, never claiming credit. Rachel felt steady, grounded in a way success never gave Ethan. Weeks later, news reached her quietly. Lawsuits followed audits. Ethan lost partnerships, then credibility. Invitations disappeared. The man who once controlled every room now struggled to control his own narrative. Rachel didn't celebrate. She didn't need revenge to feel complete. One afternoon, an email arrived from Ethan. Another apology, another explanation. Rachel read it slowly, then deleted it without reply. Closure, she learned, was not something another person granted. It was something you chose. Rachel moved into a modest apartment closer to the hospital where she now worked full-time. Her schedule was exhausting but meaningful. Patients trusted her. Colleagues respected her. She earned every step forward. Caleb remained part of her life, patient and kind. They built something careful, rooted in honesty and mutual healing. No promises rushed, no roles forced, just presence. On a quiet evening, Rachel stood at her window watching city lights flicker on. She thought of the invitation that once felt like a threat. That night had tried to define her as a failure. Instead, it revealed the truth. She had endured. She had spoken. She had chosen dignity when silence would have been easier. Rachel smiled softly, knowing this ending wasn't loud or dramatic. It was earned. It was peaceful. And it was hers. The woman once invited to be humiliated had walked away with her future intact, her name restored, and a life built not on fear, but on courage, compassion, and self-respect forever. She stepped forward calmly, knowing tomorrow would challenge her again, but confident that no one would ever take her voice, truth, or worth away from her life again.